Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to yet another episode of an Evolved Review. I am your host, James Caleb Kitchens, and as always, I'm joined by none other than the man himself, the man who consumes more wrestling content than anyone in the known multiverse, Caleb Stovall. Welcome back to the show, man.
It's true, man. What's going on? What's happening, bro?
Man, it's a good week. We had Viral Pro Wrestling this last week, stellar show. Our thoughts go out to Montana Black. He's back at home resting, but he suffered a medical emergency at the show, gave us all a scare, but thankfully he's good. Um, went to the Braves game on Monday and got to see them in the playoffs, which was fantastic. This is my first time being at the new stadium.
Oh, that's awesome. What'd you think?
I loved it, man. I used to go to Turner Field back in the day when I was a kid, and I
Yeah.
mean it was just it didn't doesn't compare at all to the new stadium.
Oh, yeah, dude. New stadium's amazing.
I'm rocking the Owen Hart Dark Side of the Ring shirt,
Nice.
so it's a good time, man. What have you been up to?
Not much, man. Just obviously I've been working a lot and everything like that. But I just got the Hulu bundle, and I see why it's so good because literally you don't have to download any of the two other apps. You can literally just get everything on Hulu.
Yeah, it's cool, man. They're
Yeah,
doing good
that's
stuff.
awesome. And I watched on Hulu actually the other day. I watched on Vice MLW
Yeah,
Fightland.
yeah, yeah. I think it's going to be an interesting thing. I really want to see how how their ratings are.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of ratings, before we get into Dark Side of the Ring,
I want to talk about this too.
I know you do. I knew it. So when I saw it, I thought, all right, WWE's being petty and shit like that. Of course, we're talking about the supposed Friday night war that's happening this week. Because all right, so due to NHL being played on TNT on Wednesday night, and then Dynamite's actually happening Saturday, but Rampage is still happening Friday night, and due to the MLB playoffs, that takes precedent over SmackDown. So it's on Fox and
It's on
SmackDown.
FS1.
Yes,
Yeah.
FS1. And so here's what's happening though. SmackDown is being advertised. I've never seen this before in my life. I've never seen an advertisement like this before in my life, but it's being advertised as a full 2 hour and 30-minute show.
Yeah, I mean, there's never been a WWE show that was made better by adding more time to it, right? So, not going to help them in the way that they think. This is actually not where I was going with this, but I think it is important that we talk about it because it's going to be tomorrow night. This will come out tomorrow morning, so it'll actually be tonight, I guess, by the time this episode airs.
Yeah.
Man,
Well, because here's the thing. I know that they did that, but I was gonna say real quick, if I may, that AEW now is deciding to counter that.
yeah, and they're doing the Friday Night War. Tony Khan is hyping it up in the press rounds and on Twitter, saying that he's going to beat SmackDown. I think they might beat SmackDown. I think it's possible. I don't like the idea that they're doing a 30-minute buy-in on the YouTube channel. That just seems silly to me. They're putting Suzuki versus Danielson on there, which I understand not putting that on the main program because I really do think that a lot of people that there's not a ton of people who are going to be super into that match. I think you've got to be like somebody who's really into New Japan.
I'm gonna be into that matchup.
Yeah, right, but you're also into New Japan. I don't think Suzuki's very good personally. I'm just not a fan. I mean, I think he's fine. I like his gimmick or whatever, and his facial expressions are cool. But I just think for an American audience, like his match with Moxley was terrible. I thought it was atrocious.
Yeah, but
Um,
him and Danielson, though, two of the hard hitting guys going at it, man.
right, it's gonna be a bunch of stiff punches and kicks and shit, and like that's fine. I mean, there's an audience for it, I'm sure. I'm not that audience, but I know that I'm not saying there's not an audience for it. I know that there is. I just don't think it's the wider audience. Um, but we definitely will be talking more about AEW as we go towards what Full Gear is the next one.
Yep.
Um, that being said, man, when you started talking about ratings, this is what I thought you were talking about. So I want to ask you this before we get into it, because we're talking about FMW today. Onita's FMW, Dark Side of the Ring, and this is one of the episodes that you really were hyped about before we even knew it was an episode. When we did our season 3 predictions, this was near the top of your list.
Yes, it was this one and the one that's, also still to come, XPW.
So let me throw a few things at you here. So the last episode from the first part of season 3. So, all right. So actually, let me go a little further back than that. So the Owen Hart episode last year, the end of season 2, drew 0.35 million viewers live. Right. We opened with Brian Pillman part 1 and 2, which did 0.027. So it did 270,000 viewers. Right.
Okay.
The Nick Gage episode dropped to 163,000. It's over half the audience dropped for the Nick Gage episode. Collision in Korea saw an uptick. By the time we got to Becoming Warrior, we were back down to 165,000. The Plane Ride from Hell went down to 153,000. And then the Onita's FMW episode is the lowest rated episode in the history of the show with 126,000 viewers. I mean, the Chris Canyon one got a slight uptick, but it's like Dark Side of the Ring, like the ratings throughout from season 2, which saw a huge amount of viewers. I mean, the most viewed episode ever, of course, is the Benoit episodes, right?
Right.
And then we kind of go down from there. Do you think it's that we're seeing the sort of luster wear off from Dark Side of the Ring, or do you think that maybe like when season 1 and 2 were out, there was no good pro wrestling on, right? Like there was no good pro wrestling on television really.
Yeah.
But now there is, and so people only have so many hours a week to watch wrestling. Do you think AEW is taking the audience?
Ooh, it's an interesting thought because some of the audience that watches Dark Side of the Ring isn't necessarily wrestling fans.
That's true. Yeah. And you got to think that Onita's FMW is. I mean, I guess maybe there's no name recognition, right? Like they see, okay, this is about a FMW, and they don't know what that is, right? Like a general audience. But if you actually sit down and watch this episode, we'll get into it. But I think this is prime Dark Side of the Ring.
No, I agree.
I really like this episode, and it has a lot of the things that Dark Side of the Ring, that the really like popular episodes have. People die, people get severely hurt or injured. It's a fucking sad story. Somebody makes off with a lot of fucking money, and there's a lot of interviews and discussions with really famous people who were either worldwide stars or came up in the Attitude Era. All the ingredients to bake that cake are all in this episode. I mean, this is a smorgasbord for somebody who is a Dark Side of the Ring fan.
Yeah. But I mean, could it be though that we're also not taking into consideration that a lot of people don't watch stuff live anymore, and that they don't even watch TV. They watch like I want to know how many views are counted on Hulu.
Right. And that's kind of one of the things that we run into is Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus, they're very coy about releasing any numbers about specific programs. And I understand why. I mean, Netflix will come out every year and say, these are the top 10 most viewed things on Netflix. And then they'll say, and these are the top 10 Netflix original programs. And that always surprises me. Squid Games is easily going to take that this year.
God, that show is unbelievably popular.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be the number one streamed show, not on Netflix, but any platform this year.
Yeah, no, it is. Like,
Um,
because they even talked about it, like, it's not just, uh, popular, like, it's not just popular in the US on Netflix, it's popular on Netflix in the world,
yeah,
like, the entire world.
and they didn't spend a whole lot of money making it. That's the crazy thing. Um, and it's just it's doing gangbuster numbers for them. So um, I think an easy number two. We're probably going to see The Witcher this year come out, but
I know you're
you.
happy about that.
Oh, I am. I'm ecstatic about it. But you drive. I mean, we had to wait 2 years for this season. So, uh, but you make a good point. How many people are really watching TV live anymore? I know that Dynamite's ratings and Rampage's ratings. Well, not Rampage's ratings. Dynamite's ratings have been really good. Um, but that's also because there's no real way to watch it other than that, other than watching it live. And while we're on this subject, Tony Khan did hint that very soon we were going to see AEW's library come to somewhere that we could watch it. So I
Ooh,
I think it's going to be on HBO Max. I could see that being a big get for them.
ooh, that'd be
Um,
that'd be interesting.
yeah, and it would be even better if there's not the long ass wait like we have on like Raw and SmackDown. Like if we could get, maybe it's not day and date, but if we could get like 3 days later, if we could get Dynamite on Saturday from the past Wednesday, that would be huge. I think it would draw a big audience. But we could talk about that for an hour. We're here for Anita's FMW, man. This
Exactly.
is this is your this is your deal. This is your episode. I know normally like we bounce stuff off each other, but I kind of take the lead on it. But I really wanted to let you take the lead on this one. I've watched the episode 3 times now. I can't get enough of it, man.
I
And
love it.
yeah, I mean, so what did you think of the episode?
Well, I absolutely loved it. It was everything I pretty much thought it was going to be and more. Basically, I absolutely love the interviews. We'll get into it and all that, but I'll start it off with the first time I saw FMW in my life. All right, I'll never forget it because I used to take karate in elementary, or I did some karate in elementary, and I met this guy there in class, and he had FMW tapes and coincidentally XPW tapes as well. So he gave me an FMW tape, and I watched it, and I was just like, "Oh my god, this is this is insane." And one of them, it was Hayabusa, and oh, I forget the guy he was feuding with. But it was him, and it was a mask versus hair match, and it was a really good match. And then on that same night, there also was an exploding barbed wire match, Cactus Jack versus Chainsaw. No, it wasn't Chainsaw Charlie, it was Chainsaw, oh my god, what is his name? Leatherface, literally Leatherface. It's just literally Leatherface. And it was a crazy event. So that was my first introduction to it, and I really like lost track of it because I never really liked their DVDs. Their DVDs were filled with these commentators who were also trying to be stand-up comedians for whatever reason. Like, it was awful.
Oh,
Like,
great.
just awful production. Like, you would have been like, that beard, you would have literally been pulling your beard out, like, just like, oh my god, like it was
Probably.
awful. So like I really didn't get to see like even the old FMW, and it wasn't ever in order, so I never really knew what was going on or anything like that. So you just kind of had to deal with what you were given basically. But that was like kind of like the first time I saw FMW, and then I learned a little bit more as it happened. But a lot of this I really didn't know, and I really didn't realize how much it was centered around the founder, which was Onita. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that as a promoter.
I mean, here's the thing, right? Is it's dangerous anytime You look at a promotion and either thing. So either the promotion is centered around one guy and that guy is the guy and the people are there to see him. You want that out of like a champion or somebody that's going to be featured, right? Like you want people to come there to see that guy. But it can't be that if that guy's not there, then the brand can't survive. That's a trap that a lot of people have fallen into, and it's a really bad one to be in. My
Yeah.
cat's making a lot of cameos tonight. If you're watching
That's
this on
fun.
the video, that's what the orange nonsense you see flying around the screen is. Um, that being said, man, I think the other danger, though, and you see this a lot of times, especially on the indies, is you've
Yeah.
got the promoter or the booker or the promoter's kid or the booker's kid or the promoter's nephew or,
Yeah.
and they're the champion, right? And that's always a recipe for disaster. Now, back in the day, it made sense. Like if you look at a lot of the old like wrestling families, right? They would
Mhm.
put the belts on the kids because they were family. They were reliable. This is in the old territory days. You weren't going to have them run off and work for Vince for more money and leave you without a champion.
Yeah.
So that makes sense, right? But I mean, today that's not really something that that makes a lot of sense or that you should do. I think there's a danger in putting your titles on people you can't reliably get. Like, if you've got somebody who's like under MLW or NWA contract, or they're taking a lot of worldwide bookings, and you're an indie company, I could see not putting your title on that person because once again, you're not the big fish for that person. You're not first chair for them. You are not their main focus. It's fine to book people like that because they're typically going to be very good and they're going to become an attraction. But when you come into a situation like FMW, that's danger times two, man. Not even talking about the in ring action. You've got the guy
Yeah.
who's a promoter, but he's also built up as the main thing that people want to see, and
Yeah.
so when if he leaves, well, I mean, you saw what happened.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it because basically FMW is and it starts off with I am Atsushi Onita. Just opening it up like that and then just hey, how goes it? Like that was awesome the way that they opened it up. And he talked about how he got into wrestling, which back at the time in Japan, if you like got into wrestling, you knew two names, Giant Baba and Antonio Inoki.
And that's the thing is like I really loved how he sort of bridged the gap between those two,
Yeah.
because Giant Baba and Inoki, I mean, they are legendary in Japan to this very day. I mean, they are basically the fathers of Japanese wrestling in the modern era.
Yes.
And I think it's an accomplishment for Onita to be considered the third name on that list.
Yeah, and I mean, and for how long he was around and stuff like that. Like, I mean, he wasn't around. I don't know if he was around that long. I mean, he definitely wasn't around as long as they were.
Right.
But so he gets into wrestling like that, and he wants to become a pro wrestler and stuff like that. And they talked about this that he went to a event and he didn't want to do what the booker wanted to do or something like that. He didn't want to lose the way that they wanted him to lose or whatnot. And he gets into a little bit of trouble. They go and they beat him up. How common was this back in the day?
Well, man, when you talk about this in pro wrestling, and this is a topic that's come up really heavily as of late. It's like like Mark Henry and Bubba Ray Dudley actually got into some hot water recently about some their comments on this. And Bubba Ray was saying, back in the day, somebody was disrespectful, you would slug them a couple of times or whatever. And this is considered in a lot of places, um, to be the way that things were. I mean, up until very recently in the WWE, never in AEW, but a lot of places, especially in like the smaller, like kind of more rural areas of the country, like the southeast. I mean, especially your smaller, less professional indie promotions. This is still shit that goes on. Um,
Right.
and it's like there is a certain level of unprofessionalism about that. Like, if somebody comes to viral and we book them to do a finish and they just go behind our back and not do the finish we asked for,
Right.
we're just not going to book them again. We're not going to beat the shit out of them. But there's
Right.
a small contingent of people that, that's how the business was back in the day, and they were taught that, and that was taught to them, and that was taught to the people that taught them, and it just kind of perpetuated through the industry. And it's like, this is a job. You know what I mean? If somebody disagrees with the CEO of Exxon in the boardroom, he's not going to beat the shit out of him after the meeting. You know what I'm saying? It's like wrestling
Exactly.
is a business, and just because it involves choreographed, or not even choreographed, but worked fighting, staged fighting,
Yeah.
um, does not mean that you can then take out your frustrations or disagreements with somebody by beating the bejesus out of them. That being said, to answer your question in the longest winded way possible, it happened all the fucking time.
I was about to say you turned into Eric Bischoff there for a minute.
This is why I asked the questions, not answered them, because
I know, right?
this will happen all the time.
I know, right? But it was there though, and through that he met the legend himself. And oh, I'm sorry, I got to do this. The best there is, the best there was, Terry Funk. All right, now ask me some questions.
That was amazing.
Thank you.
That was spot on. That was really good. I mean, that was really good. I mean, that was better than your Russo. I mean, it was great.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
I loved Terry Funk here.
Yes.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think you even mentioned this on the last episode when we were doing the Canyon episode.
Hmm.
Terry Funk is the star of this episode.
Yes.
Absolutely. He was incredible. I mean, I love Terry Funk. I mean, it's crazy to me. I guess it's just because Terry Funk was never like in WrestleMania. He was never on that level. But it's just so crazy to me that Funk is not compared to like the Hogans and the Rocks and the Austins of our business. And I guess
I
that
know.
is, yeah, and I guess that is because it's like he never did, he never had the one thing that all those people had that he never did is he did not have a, top of the company run with Vince McMahon.
He didn't, but a lot of people forget though how big Terry Funk was back in the day. I mean,
Yeah.
Terry Funk, he was a movie star at one point. He did it before Hogan.
Yeah.
I mean, that Patrick Swayze movie still to this day is talked about. It's still played on TV to this day, and he's in it. So I mean, he was huge back in the day, and but I think it's because a lot of people, when they were getting into wrestling, obviously the 90s was the peak movement of wrestling.
Right.
And when he was getting, big through that era, a lot of people knew him for his hardcore stuff rather than his old NWA matches. A lot of people forget that he could old school wrestle and stuff like that, and they looked at him as more just a hardcore guy,
Yeah.
middle-aged and crazy.
Yeah. I mean, he could talk, he could wrestle, he could fight,
I
and
wouldn't
he
give him a
and
mic though on that Shotgun Saturday Night where he goes, "Your mother's a whore."
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he could talk, he could fight, he could wrestle, and
Yes,
he could do the hardcore style as good as anybody. I mean, him and Foley had some absolute all out battles. But
yes,
I think that Terry Funk is very much the old school wrestler mentality, right? And I mean, I would be surprised if he has very much to show for his legendary career as far as financially, and that's awful. I mean, it really is, you know. But
Yeah.
if you look at it, I don't think he had very many opportunities for large paydays. I mean, some of these main event matches he had with Onita in front of 30, 40, 50,000 people, he even talks about it in this special that he didn't make very much money.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll talk about that as we progress here because that becomes a big topic and everything like that. But so Onita meets Terry Funk. You know, he's in USA a lot and stuff like that, and where he kind of gets the idea for FMW, not necessarily FMW, but for hardcore wrestling, basically is the infamous concession stand brawl, which was from Memphis, Tennessee, back in like Jerry Lawler's and Jeff Jarrett's dad's promotion.
Yeah, I mean, it's just crazy to believe to me that Jerry Jarrett may ultimately be responsible
For
for,
hardcore wrestling.
well, at least for FMW and the extent that it went to. It's like how, you know eh, we talk about this a lot, right? Like we talked about Foley falling off the cell or being thrown off the cell, and the impact of that, literally and figuratively, on pro wrestling, right? And this was kind of similar. It's like you have this idea, and people haven't seen it before, or it catches a lot of people's attention, and so then someone says, "Hmm, I will take that, and I will run with it," because Jerry Jarrett had a lot of restraint, right? I mean, a lot of
Right.
your legendary kind of bookers, you had to have that because you have to know that ultimately, if you end up in a situation where you're constantly trying to top everything that you've ever done, then you will eventually hit the wall, right? There
Right.
has to be an ebb and flow. You have to build, big show where all this amazing shit happens, and then you come back down and you
Yeah.
build. And it's one thing to want to continually progress and write better angles and better stories and have better talent. That's something everyone should do. But you can't, if you're going off of shock value alone, or you're trying to make these big moments over and over again, you're going to hit the wall very quickly.
Yeah, and I guess that's pretty much what happened with FMW ultimately and stuff like that. But Onita kind of gets this idea for hardcore wrestling. He kind of realizes that it triggers people's success or it triggers people's reaction even more so than a regular matchup and stuff like that when he's involved in this brawl. He says even a woman goes and kicks him in the face and stuff like that. Like that's crazy.
Yeah,
But
I
that
mean,
basically gets the idea though.
especially in some of these sort of more dangerous areas, right? I mean, Memphis was known for being a place where the crowd was incredibly rowdy. I
Yep.
mean, you have these people that come to these matches and then you're playing a heel, right? And you got to keep in mind this is during an era where people still think that this is real. And
Right.
there is a contingent today that still are complete marks, but I think that the majority of the fan base that's watching wrestling like religiously today are smart marks, right? Like they
Right.
know that they're watching a staged product.
Right.
And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but I'm saying that to understand this situation, you have to put it in the minds of these people that they think that this dude is really a piece of shit and he's really trying to beat up their hero. They,
Mm-hmm.
it's the classic Dusty Rhodes promo. These people go to work, they work their ass off to be able to afford the money to buy this ticket so they can see their hero fight for them. And
Yeah.
this is the guy that's like, fuck these guys, and is trying to, as far as they know, put their hero they paid to see in the hospital.
Yeah. Well, that's where Onita is in USA, and then he returns to Japan and stuff like that, and he's getting really good. He's getting really popular and stuff like that. He's on a roll, and he does sort of more of a high flying style of wrestling, and it high flying wasn't really even that popular back in the day. Not when Onita started, at least, and whatnot. And then apparently a freak accident happened. Literally, he just jumps to the floor, and his bone in his knee goes straight through.
And the thing is that, and that just goes to show like how dangerous this is. He
Yeah,
wasn't doing a suicide dive. He wasn't doing a senton. He literally was jumping off the ring apron
yeah,
to the floor.
yeah. It's not that far.
Well, unless you're at viral,
Well, that's true.
because our ring,
That thing is elevated a little bit.
because that ring's like 5-6 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean it's in most rings it's 3-4 feet
Well, then so
tops.
yeah, exactly. Well, then so as this horrible injury happens to him, he's being carried off and everything in front of the live crowd and stuff like that. He obviously, contemplates retirement, or actually does retire in ways like, or at least just stops doing it. And then he decides he wants to get back into it, realizes he can't do the things that he used to do. So this is where he gets the idea basically for FMW. He realizes, well, if I can't do, that style that I was doing for other people, I'm gonna do a new style and, create my own thing, I guess. And he goes and he books a wrestler versus karate like a martial artist, basically. So it's pro wrestling versus martial arts in a matchup, and those matches, and you could tell from the video, were absolutely brutal.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, dude, like you saw him, like they were kicking the shit out of each other.
yeah, it was definitely, um, I don't know if they were using the term strong style at the time, but it was definitely brutal at the very least.
Yeah, it was just it was barbaric, and Onita realizes that the crowd is getting really into this, and he's like, okay. And this is kind of where I was kind of like, okay, so wait a minute, was it just literally these three matches, and he just went, all right, FMW formed, basically? Like they kind of just were like it was kind of just like an all of a sudden, all right, FMW's formed. So I
Yeah, I
don't know.
mean, there was an element of that to it where it seemed really spontaneous, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Onita knew that he had no career in the business as far as being able to do all the athletics he was able to do before, and he was never Ricochet, you know what I mean? But he was he as you said he was a decent cruiserweight. He was doing the high flying stuff. He had a lot of charisma. I mean, you got to think about it. To get over as a Japanese person in the United States in the '80s, he had to have a lot of charisma,
Yep.
right? Um, and that's what carried him. He realized, okay, well, I can't do the stuff I was doing, but I can come back and be this character. I can be this persona.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I may be jumping the gun a little bit here, but Jericho talks about the exploding death match where he says this is the most babyface thing he's ever seen,
Yeah.
where he goes back in and covers Terry Funk and to shield him from the explosion. Now, unfortunately, this moment was very recently ruined by John Moxley and AEW because they tried to rip it off, and it was the most embarrassing thing in the history of that company, if not. Well, I can't say the last 10 years because so many things, but yeah, I mean, all I could think about when Jericho was talking about that moment was that botch. But yeah, I mean,
That, but this definitely wasn't a botch.
no, I mean in the '90s, man. I mean, I agree with Jericho. That's like the most baby face thing ever. You triumph over the villain, but you still run back in to save him from the explosion, and that's just. That is like some Dragon Ball Z shit if it ever happened. you know.
Yeah, and Jericho even talked about what Onita would do at the end of matches, and I remember this in FMW. Like he would literally like it was like they literally went to war. You know that they had blood, like he had blood all over him and stuff like that. He would cry to the fans. He would thank them. He'd be like, "You stood behind me. I kept fighting. Blah blah blah. All this other stuff." And he even mentioned it. They would play Joan Jett's version of Wild Thing. And that literally got over. It got over so much that people need to realize Onita was up there with the popularity of Hulk Hogan, basically.
Yeah. And John Moxley is just living out his really shitty Onita power fantasy every week.
I knew that was going to come up at some point. I knew it was. I knew it was, but
I'm
whatever.
not wrong.
I know you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. But anyways, so we continue on with FMW. Here is where he gets the idea though for barbed wire matches. All right. So he, because obviously they asked him, how do you come up with a barbed wire matchup? And he said, well, as a child, I ran into it or something like that. I touched it, it hurt me and it scared me. And I knew that the fans would like this danger, basically. And Mick Foley, I love Mick Foley to death, but he says, we care about this profession, or we care about the fans more than we do ourselves. And real injuries are not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, they're encouraged.
That's that's the Mick Foley way, man. That's the way that it went. I gotta wonder if this barbed wire was clipped. If you see barbed wire used in a match today, it's clipped.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it definitely can still hurt you, but it's not as likely. They go through and clip the sharp ends off, so it's more of a flat end. So yeah, it's metal. It can still cut you. It can still stab into you, but it's much less likely that you're gonna have a piece of barbed wire go half an inch into your skull or whatever,
Yeah.
um, or take your eye out or whatnot. But I would not be shocked at all if the barbed wire in these matches was just bought at the store and strung up on the ring.
Yeah, so there's a person that shows up in this episode that's also a great interview as well, who knows a thing or two about that, and it wasn't Onita. It was one of the guys that was made famous not only in FMW but in also ECW. He is the homicidal, suicidal, genocidal tandem known as Sabu. Sabu shows up in this episode, and I loved when they asked him, they said, so what's it like working with barbed wire? He just goes, oh, it sucks.
Yeah, yeah. I remember. I think that I didn't watch a lot of ECW as a kid. The first time that I watched Sabu like regularly, like just me watching his matches live as they were happening was probably was his feud with Abyss in
Yeah, which I
TNA.
loved, by the way.
Yeah, it was good. You know, uh, Here's the thing I said when I saw Sabu in this episode. I did not expect him to be there, and I was like, "Damn, we're seeing Sabu in Dark Side of the Ring before a Genie episode and before the inevitable Sabu episode because there is going to be a fucking Sabu episode, whether he's alive or dead. I promise you.
Probably. But I
Probably after he's dead. There will be a fucking Sabu episode. I promise you that. There is enough material for it.
Okay, well, you're probably right about that. But I knew we were going to get Sabu in this because he was a big staple in FMW when it first started. And that was how he made his name. And, he gets the connection with his uncle, the Sheik. And they are put into a matchup that is an Inferno matchup before Inferno was a thing in WWE, except this was on another level. This was on a dangerous level that really did get dangerous. Like, this is the infamous fire match, basically, in FMW. What did you think seeing this? Have you ever seen this before?
I have not seen this before. I think not everybody, but pretty much anybody who's been into wrestling for a while and has gone around the internet has probably seen the ill-fated Hayabusa clip, but a lot of people haven't seen this. Um, and it's important to note here too. The Sheik was world famous. I mean, absolutely world famous. I mean, he could probably go to any major territory on Earth and get work.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so it's important to realize how famous he was and how that kind of led to Sabu, getting his spot in the business. But also, I mean, this fire match or whatever. When WWE did the Inferno match, it was smart, right? Like they had the little gas or whatever, flame emitters around the ring, and whenever the somebody would take a bump, whoever in the production truck would hit the fire and it would come up and whatever. But this, man, no, they just wrapped a bunch of it looked like bed sheets
Yeah.
around the ropes and ignited them. And I'm like, did you guys not test this? I mean, people could have been like incredibly injured. I mean, they were. I mean, the Sheik was burned. I think they said over 60% of his body.
Yeah, yeah, he couldn't get out. They all apparently saw a window where they could get out, and he couldn't get out, but he did manage to get out in time, thank God. So thank God this wasn't much worse than what it was. But I mean, this was scary, and that's the thing. Onita now is running into that thing of like, all right, first we got a barbed wire matchup. Well, now we can't, just do that. Now we got to put explosives in the ring and stuff like that. And then, then we have the exploding pool matchup, which features Mike Awesome of all people in that. He's known as the Gladiator in FMW. But I mean, how does one come up with this stuff? Like,
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like their exploding barbed wire match, or whatever, actually looked fucking great. And
yeah,
it's
it does.
crazy that AEW couldn't do one 30 years later, that looked even half as good because like, and don't get me wrong, the explosions and stuff in this, it's still exactly what you expect, but they looked great.
Yeah,
um Hell, I thought the fucking exploding pool match was cool as fuck. Like, I just thought
me
that
too.
was, I was like, man, how come WCW never did that at, when they did the um with the ring, they had the ring out in the middle of the water or whatever. I'm like,
Yeah,
why the fuck did they ever do this?
at Club La Vila.
Yes. Um, I was just there a month ago. But yes, how the fuck did this never happen? Right? And so I just think that is the coolest thing. Maybe Tony Khan watched this and was like, you know what? Because you can do that safely.
Yeah,
Because if
you
you look at it, they have the explosives. The guy goes in the water and the explosives go off, and he's not even really near them.
Yeah, exactly. And if you notice, like when Onita shielded Terry Funk, and they had the big explosion ring, I see what it is. It's around them, but it doesn't actually explode the ring.
Right. It's all around them, and they put a bunch of smoke out. So it's literally the smoke part of smoke and mirrors. I mean,
Yeah,
um,
but
and
it still looked good.
it looked fantastic. Yeah. And then they get into this match with the fire, and the thing that's important to note here with the fire is like, and I guess they didn't think about this, is when you've got all that fire around the ring, you're burning all the oxygen, and they
Yeah,
were completely surrounded. So within minutes, they cannot breathe,
yeah,
and that's why the Sheik couldn't get out. It wasn't that oh well, damn, the ring's burning. Oh, I can dive through the ropes right here. He could not catch his breath. There was no oxygen for him to breathe to be able to do that. He probably damn near passed out. And then when he rolls out of the ring, they threw water on him, which is the worst thing to do. And it peeled his damn skin off. I mean, he had to have been in absolute agony. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, you just got to be tough as nails, but like that still had to be the worst thing he's ever experienced.
well, they pretty much stopped the match, after that and everything. So, and Onita said it was a bad night. So it was a terrible idea. But, He obviously didn't have a lot of bad ideas, apparently. And this stuff is getting like, Onita, when he was running FMW, they even mentioned this. He was not like, Terry Funk says it best, he's like about 30 or 40,000, something like that, in the stadium. And he's like, and they weren't charging 50 cents a ticket. like
Right.
like it was like, so he's selling out stadiums. Like we're not talking just arenas, he's selling out stadiums with these exploding rings and exploding death matches and this hardcore style. And it wasn't just him that was also the attraction. I mean, Onita was the main attraction, but he also did have a cast of characters. He did have the Gladiator Mike Awesome. Cactus Jack was there. Terry Funk, obviously, when he got him. And then, he also had Mr. Pogo. That's a very big name in FMW. That guy was sick as fuck. That's all I'm going to say. He literally had a sickle and would literally slice the dude. And
Ricky Fuji.
Ricky, this is a Ricky Fuji.
Yeah.
My man.
Yeah.
He was amazing in this episode.
He did. Yeah. The whole thing, they talk about how like after Onita left that the I was gonna say the ratings, but the draw was down. The gates were way down.
When
But it
Onita,
also
or sorry, when Onita running company, lots of people everywhere. At New FMW, very little people.
yeah, I thought that was funny. But here's the thing though, you also have to keep in mind they weren't booking those people you just named either. Terry
No,
Funk didn't seem like he was there. It didn't seem like they had Mick Foley there. They may have had Mike Awesome, but I mean, really, it looked like Hayabusa and a bunch of random fucking dudes. And then, of course, they had all these WWE-esque angles. I love how everything about the new FMW just screamed Vince McMahon.
it did. It did. And you want to know something? I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but uh, with one of those FMW shows that I saw, the very first one, there was a matchup between Hayabusa, and he actually had his mask off at the time and was going by H, and he was facing the evil Hayabusa or whatnot. That was so fucking stupid. It's not even funny. Guess who the special guest referee for that match was? HBK, Shawn Michaels. Yes, look it up. He was a special guest referee in FMW. He is on an FMW show with the Shawn Michaels music as his entrance theme. And he's even like, he looks like basically he does the DX Shawn Michaels almost, but I don't remember exactly when it was, but he is the special guest referee. So
It
you talk
was
about it screams Vince McMahon. I'm surprised no one mentioned that in this episode.
they probably. Well, I was gonna say they probably didn't want to talk about Shawn Michaels, but they have. I mean, they did the Montreal Screwjob.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, man. I mean, they definitely. I can't believe they didn't talk about it because it was the main event for their 10th anniversary show. Is in '99.
Yes, it was. It was. And that was also where it had one of the dumbest ass angles I've ever seen, an emphasis on the word ass, when they had an anal explosion match.
It was so ridiculous, man. But
Yeah.
um, you
Yeah, I
know,
mean,
uh, looking at this card, right? The Funks are on the 10th anniversary card. Hayabusa's on the card. Masato Tanaka's on the card.
yes.
I don't see anybody else that's a real draw on the whole thing.
There's not, but there is an exploding cage match.
Yeah. A
Like,
13,000 volt electrical thunderbolt cage death match.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a
It
lot to say.
is. But, and here's the thing. They were trying to obviously market it to an even bigger audience. They wanted to get played in the US at the time, and they wanted to get played in other places. And, the deathmatch thing wasn't really looked highly upon. obviously. It was very violent. FMW was known as, as Mick Foley called it, a buffet of brutality.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is, I don't know if Onita had stayed there, how long does it last? Like if he had kept booking, but had simply stepped down from wrestling, who knows? I mean, they talked about Hayabusa being potentially the next big star, and I think he would have been from a babyface perspective, but they needed somebody else to really go in and carry the hardcore mantle that Onita had. And
Hmm.
and they really could have separated the two. As a matter of fact, I think that would have been the smart thing to do. Um, but is did it crash and burn because they forced Onita out of the company? Maybe. Did it crash and burn because of the decisions they were making about the booking? I think that's probably the number one. And then the very tragic circumstances surrounding Hayabusa. That's one of the most tragic things to ever happen in wrestling. And here we are, about 32 episodes in the Dark Side of the Ring.
No, no, yeah, I completely agree. I remember I saw a clip of that. I'll never like this is the only time during this episode where I will literally look away. I can't look at it. It's awful. It's heartbreaking, and unfortunately that happened. And the guy could have been, one of the biggest stars ever in Japan. He had that kind of mass appeal potential, but it just never, materialized. And it's probably because of, the new era of FMW. Here's also something that we haven't touched upon that I really wanted to get your thoughts on. Okay. You not only being a promoter and booker and stuff like that, you've also had to deal with buildings. I don't believe any of those buildings that you had to deal with, though, involved the Yakuza.
I don't know, man. The auction house is possible. Uh, that was an interesting place, but yeah, man. While we were talking about the Hayabusa thing, I just want to throw this in real quick.
Yeah.
How skilled is Chris Jericho that he's done that move for 30 years and never, and I mean he's over 50 and he's still doing the move that Hayabusa broke his neck trying.
Yeah. I mean, everyone who is a high flyer still does that move.
I see very few people do lion salts.
Oh, well,
Um, I mean, I'm not saying Jericho's the only guy to ever do it. I'm saying he's the only guy to ever do it for that long on TV and that often.
yeah, true.
Um, but not to derail from your question, man. Yeah, I loved this part of the episode. I thought this was really unique, as it was like, because of course the Yakuza had all of um, the clout over the arenas. I mean, if you look at it in the United States, it's big corporations, but in Japan at the time, the Yakuza had a lot of control over all the different arenas.
Yeah.
Um, and they talked about how they would have the reserve seating for them, and nobody wanted to go over there. That reminded me a lot of when you watch the Crown Jewel shows for WWE. You have all of the higher up government officials and their families in that one section, and there's no one around them, and none of the wrestlers go over there, and and it's very much like that because these are dangerous people, um, that are you're in a place where they can do significant harm to you, and no one's going to stop them.
Yeah, and I am surprised that Sabu is still with us to this day.
Yeah, I mean, if it weren't for Mike Awesome, he may not be. You
Yeah.
know, um, and Mick Foley talks about them going out and like kind of whining and dining these guys, and I mean, and that he was really uncomfortable with it, but you have to, yeah, like you have to remember that Onita was trying to make the most amount of money. So yeah, he probably was getting a great deal on getting the venue, which is
Yeah.
a significant cost for having a show this large.
Yeah. It was insane, and it was interesting. But what did you think of his exit from FMW? Not the one where they force him out, basically, but where he first retires and hands it over to the ring announcer. I mean, because in VPW, that's what we're planning, right? Like you and Josh are just gonna leave, and y'all are gonna hand it to nobody, right?
I mean, honestly, man, I think Young Professor would make an incredible booker or promoter. He would do a better job than I think 80% of the people doing it right now, and that's a fact. Um, yeah, this to me felt like he didn't want to close the company. He wanted to go off and spend the large amount of money that he made, and he wanted to get into acting. When that didn't work out, he wanted to come back. But I mean, leaving the company with the ring announcer, yeah, Onita really set him up for failure. And I think, I think too, you take the company and the company's got debts and obligations and things like that. If you say, "Oh, I gave it to this guy and he runs it now," then you've saddled them with all of it and you make off with all of your profit that you've taken. And that's what he did. And Terry Funk pretty much like without going too far into it says he didn't give jack shit to the ring announcer.
Yeah.
And he's right. I mean, only thing he gave him was the company, right? And it's like, oh well, here, run it, you know. And there probably wasn't enough money to run the company's operations, which led to this dude going into severe debt with the yakuza. Um, and ultimately led to his death. We don't know if there were other things at play there, but it's like the guy didn't know what he was doing as far as the wrestling business.
Yeah. Let's talk about it. His name is Io Shirai, right?
Yes.
Yes. And he and
It's
Jericho.
Shiochi Arai.
Oh, Chio Shirai. Okay, so Shirai takes over the company, and people had impressions of him and stuff like that. But he also hires someone else who, by the name of Ricky Tan, right? Or what was his name?
Um,
I forget his name, and I forgot to write it down when I was watching this episode.
I don't remember. It was very short.
Yeah, like
Um,
it didn't really give him much thought, but so they have a different idea for where FMW needs to go. It obviously does not, Onita doesn't like it. He does not like the direction that they're taking it. So they force him out, and now they're running FMW completely, and it's just not doing well. And so Shirai, unfortunately, gets in so much debt with the Yakuza. He has no idea what to do. So he goes and he unfortunately takes his own life. And, uh, you know, they mentioned this is the Yakuza that doesn't work like that where you're dead and you're debt free basically. No, that money goes to now the family, and they're going to get their money obviously.
and
um
they didn't talk about this in the episode, but when he died, FMW was 3 million in debt,
mhm.
and this is in dollars, not yen, so it's converted. And then he owed the yakuza an additional 1 million.
Yeah.
And apparently, his life insurance payment covered a good chunk of it, but then the his wife's father was fortunately a pretty wealthy guy and ended up paying the rest of it eventually.
Mm. Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, absolutely, it's a terrible situation. We always have to have that tragic element in Dark Side of the Ring, and you know,
We got several.
yeah, I mean, there is one element of this where people blame Onita for this, and definitely Onita certainly didn't help the situation, right? But the other thing is, this guy did have the whole company. He made poor decisions. He made the decision to get in bed with the loan sharks. And I'm not trying to place it all on him. But as Sabu said, that it's if the guy killed himself over the money issues, they're gonna get the money out of his family. So it's like there's not a lot that he really can do there.
Yeah,
Uh, and I think it was really wrong the way that they ran Onita out of the company.
I did too. And clearly they needed Onita because Onita was the reason FMW was successful. And even like, let's say if Onita wasn't wrestling, he could have been valuable behind the scenes. He probably could have made new stars or something like that. I don't know. Maybe he couldn't have. We'll never know. Because unfortunately, that's where, everything ends. FMW ends, and but it leaves behind this interesting legacy, does it not?
I mean, it really does. It's one of those things where the company wasn't around for very long, but you've got so much history in just that short amount of time. There were so many notable things that happened. Obviously, the Onita and Terry Funk feud is one of the better feuds in the history of the business.
Yeah,
It
really
was
is.
legendary in Japan. And the fact that FMW has kind of the legacy that it has is impressive. Onita seems to still be doing pretty well. He looked good.
No, no, yeah, he did, and I was gonna say FMW though, while it was around for a short time, let's face it, hardcore wrestling would not be around today if it wasn't for FMW and Atsushi Onita. And they even say that pretty much, and I agree with them. Like, I don't think there would be an ECW. There definitely wouldn't be an Attitude Era. There definitely would not have been, XPW. There wouldn't be deathmatch wrestling. Game Changer Wrestling would not exist to this day if it wasn't for the legacy of FMW.
I think FMW did all of that, and it also showed people where the line is, right? Like
Yeah.
FMW took shit to the absolute extreme. And if you look at some of the things that Onita did, some of the things he booked, some of it is a very good roadmap for how to build a promotion out of nowhere, how to build a promotion in the shadow of a larger promotion, how to stand out and brand yourself. But a lot of it too is a cautionary tale of not getting trapped in, like I said, this shock value booking. A lot of it is a cautionary tale regarding centering your promotion around one persona or one character, or pushing things to the limits and putting to the point where you're putting your talent in significant danger. So it's definitely a double sided coin here in that respect. But the legacy is not up for debate. I mean, it's definitely a legendary part of wrestling history.
Yeah, it really is. It was one that I was really excited to cover. So before we wrap this up, I want to get your thoughts now. Aside from everything that happened in Dark Side of the Ring, I want to get your thoughts now on just certain types of matches, the exploding barbed wire matches and the exploding pool match. Do you think those are stupid, or do you think those can actually work?
I think both of them can work. I think the amount of here's the thing, if the Moxley and Omega match had been good, it was still poorly built, right? Like I think either of these types of matches, maybe not the exploding pool. I think the barbed wire death match or whatever, as a way to end like an incredible personal feud, I
Mm-hmm.
think it absolutely can work. But it
Yeah.
can't. It could be like the Hell in the Cell in the '90s before they just started putting it out all the fucking time and doing a Hell in the Cell pay per view and making it not mean anything, right?
Exactly.
Um, that's the way I would use it. The exploding pool match, I think like AEW could do it once, maybe as like a but it needs to be a multi-man match, right? It's got to be it would have to be like a 10-man, 8 or 10-man match, and the winner gets a title shot at something, right? You know what I mean? So like when you're thrown in the pool and it blows up, you're out, because it would look really stupid on television for somebody to get thrown in the pool, boom, and then they crawl out and they're soaking wet, and then they have to get back in the ring and try to wrestle some more. That will not work, like logistically. But if they had this big kind of match, maybe it's even like a ladder match, so you got somebody that goes off the ladder out into the water, right? And I think that could work very sparingly. Like you can do one every couple years tops.
Yeah.
Um,
And it also would be a great seller for the video game
right. The
because
res-
you know people would love to do those types of matches in a video game.
yes, but the restraint has to be there, and
Oh,
that's critical.
oh yeah, absolutely. But yeah, man, this was one I was excited for, and I am so glad that it was done so good, and it was better than I could have even hoped it was. Like it was everything I thought it was going to be and more. And yeah, dude, this was awesome. It does make me like hardcore wrestling a little more, you know, and it just goes to show that if there's a wrestling ring in front of it, then I like it. Even if it's bad, you know, like even if it's bad, I just love pro wrestling, you know.
Well, we've only got 4 episodes left in season 3. We have Bikers, Bombs, and Bedlam, Johnny K9 episode. The the Many Faces of Luna Vachon.
Yep.
We have Rob Black's XPW, which I know you're also looking forward to, and
Yes.
then we are gonna cap off this season with what could be the biggest episode. It's definitely an episode that had a ton of impact on the industry, and that's the Steroid Trials.
Yes.
So I'm excited, man, and I really enjoyed this episode. When you were like FMW when we were doing the season 3 predictions, I was like, they're not gonna fucking do that, but there was so much story to be told here, and I learned a lot from this episode, and I really liked it.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. I told you it was going to be different. It was going to be unique, just because you know that's basically the birth of deathmatch wrestling was frontier martial arts wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, I definitely appreciate you joining me for this one.
I
It was,
appreciate you let me take the lead on this one.
yeah, man. We'll probably do it again for XPW. I liked the change in roles
Yeah,
a lot, so we'll have to switch it up more often.
yeah,
But yeah, we'll probably do it again for XPW because I know that you've been waiting for that one for forever
yes,
too.
I have. I can't wait for it.
So, well, all of that being said, my man, this has been not only a great episode, but it's also been an Evolved review.